Hi, welcome. I've already filmed this, but I am about to take you on a reading vlog of Zodiac Academy The Awakening, which is number 1 in the Zodiac Academy series. So if you are intrigued by this series, or if you've read it before and just want to hear my thoughts as we go along, grab a cup of tea and let's do it. Let's read Zodiac Academy The Awakening, and this is a reread for me, and I'm so excited to have you along for the trip. I'm aware this isn't the best quality, but we're just going to do a check-in before I go get ready for the day. Like quarter-ish of the way through, I probably mentioned in the intro that I have read this book before. I think, oh yeah, I had to look on Storygraph, and I think it said I've read it twice before. Yeah, it's not my first read, but the last time I read it was, first time I read it was in 2022, then 2024, and now we're picking it up 2026. There we go. Hopefully this time I'm definitely going to make it through the series. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but I'm going to do very much just kind of spoilers and just talking about my thoughts as I go along. So yeah, at this point, it's things I've read before, but I'm still enjoying it, and future knowledge of some things is great on a reread. So we meet Darcy and Tori, and I don't know if I picked up on this before, but this is very much like Tori's book. I think this probably isn't new, or isn't like crazy thought to anyone that read the books, but this is Tori's series, isn't it? And Darcy's kind of like an afterthought. I remember thinking that Tori had a lot more characterization than Darcy did, and I stand by that, even though I'm only like a quarter of the way through. You can clearly see that Tori is the main character, or the favourite of the authors. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just pointing it out. So they've just been picked up by Orion. They've come to the academy. Where I'm up to, Tori's just had her first fire element lesson. So they've come to this academy, found out that they're princesses that they didn't know about in this fey world that they didn't know about. You're just literally plucked and popped in. Away you go. And they're mortal girls through and through, but they're also girls that have, or ladies, because they're 18, they have been through it, they were raised as orphans, they've been in foster care pretty much their whole life, they've not had a good job, they've had to learn to look after one another and themselves. They've particularly Tori has had to do a lot of I was going to say questionably legal, but no, illegal things to keep a roof over their head and food in their mouth. So whilst they are conflicted about it, and they're not 100% on board, they also know that this is the best option for them at the moment. And there's also like the promise of wealth at the end, because they are princesses, and they're still in that. Obviously we're only like this much the way through, but they're still in the mindset of the belief that they'll be able to graduate, take their money and leave, and not have to do any of the ruling or the throne stuff, which obviously in further books, as we learn more about the society and stuff and secrets and what certain parents are up to, that is going to change. But for the time being, it's nice to see how kind of naively they've stepped into this, but you can let them off because they didn't choose to step into this. This isn't their choice. They are thrown into this, so yeah, it's enjoyable seeing this. And I got up to, let me double check, I think I might have got up to book 6 previously. And then too much time had passed for me to continue without a reread, in my opinion. I read up to book 5, and I didn't read any of the like novellas or any of the side books, which I will be reading on this reread. So if I look at this, my original rating on this, review on this, was 4.5. But yeah, so I think the very first time I read it, I enjoyed it, but I don't think I was overly impressed. And the second time, because I knew what to expect going into it, I definitely enjoyed it more. And this time I'm enjoying it even more. So maybe it's one of those books that I know you get more out of it every time you read it. I don't know. But knowing that it's kind of a little cheesy, it's kind of like the Riverdale of this style of book, helps in enjoying it. Knowing that there's going to be Pegasi. No, there's going to be like unicorns that fart or whatever. Having that knowledge as you go into it helps you work out the expectations of how serious to take it, and it also has done well at like having a little bit of like a it's going to be a bit of a frivolous start, and then the darker stuff happens. And the best series, I think, are like that. I know there's a lot of series that are great that start with the drama right at the beginning, but I find the series that stick with me are the ones that they draw me in with silliness, and like the stakes seem high, but in the grand scheme of things, when you look back 6, 7, 8 books down the line, they're not high at all. They're the books that really stay with me, and they're the characters that I really care about. Some of the series that I think do that really well is the Skullduggery Pleasant series, the True Blood series, which is another series that I'm going to be starting from scratch this year because far too much time has passed and I don't even remember which book I got up to in that. So yeah, we're meeting like our main characters. We've met friends wise, we've met Sophie, or is it Sophia? Sorry, Sophia. We've met Diego. We've met Geraldine, and every time I read Geraldine, because she is later on, she is my favorite character. So I'm excited to watch that process again of me just find her so irritating and then loving her to the point that I will die for her. When I've never listened to the audiobooks, so in my head she's always been British, but my friend listened to the audiobooks and said that she is like Southern American, which I still can't in my head even reading it now. She's British, I'm sorry. She is a British person, especially with her silly cusses and stuff. Yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot read her as anything else. And then we've briefly met the Heirs, who obviously are written to be horrible and cruel and bullies. And I was going to say at the beginning they're written that way, but they're kind of that way throughout. It's just like them and the twins kind of find a middle ground at some point. But we've only kind of been introduced to them. We've not properly met them. We've had the like initiation that Seth and Darius did on the girls, or on the twins when I keep calling them girls, when they joined their elemental houses. But yeah, we're very much in the midst of just getting to know one another, getting to know the world, and getting settled in the academy. We have had their like first lesson with Orion, learning about the orders of the Fae, and now I know what they are, having read further on before, and we can see I did highlight a few bits that kind of do indicate it from early on. So when they're testing their elements, like awakening them, the fire one starts straight away, immediately, whereas the rest take a little moment. Then we have like Tori, when she goes through the fire for the initiation, she could, like, her powers are just bumping up and up. So there are all these indicators that being near fire is charging them up. And Tori's in her fire class, and rather Pyro, the teacher, Professor Pyro, is saying like you should be drained because Caleb's just fed from you, but instead she's just got more and more like power, to the point it like knocks Professor Pyro out, you know, drains her completely. So they did, the authors did have the plan of what they were going to be, and they thought it through from the beginning, which is great to see those breadcrumbs from the beginning when you reread. So yeah, I'm gonna go get ready for the day. Hey, and then I'll be back with some more thoughts later on. So I have midway point thoughts. So at this point we've met a few more of the teachers. Well, I guess one teacher, one that I want to talk about, and that is Washer, Professor Washer. I don't understand how such an absolute skeevy pervert is a teacher here. Look, I know this Feywild is crazy, but every time he comes onto a page, and I remember this the first time I read this, I just feel like my entire body like folding in on itself. It's just so repulsive. And yeah, I think that is a great introduction to what sirens are, because we haven't really had anything with Max thus far, and so it's great to have that kind of idea in your head of what Max could be like, because he's a siren as well. And we also had the first lesson that Darcy has with Orion, and I think that that's a really good way to get some information across on how the world works, or like how the Fey realm works. And we've also had a little discussion of nymphs and how they are like the kind of background big bad that's happening. Yeah, so far it's just more of the twins just getting used to how the school's running. We've obviously got the introduction more of Facebook, which is the Fae version of Facebook, which just gags me every time because it's so funny. And all of the students with their dumb hashtags, it's perfection for how teenagers, I know they're like 18, but is how teenagers talk. Yeah, that's the thing about this. So everyone in here is 18, and they're kind of, I think the reason they're 18 is because obviously it's going to be quite a smutty book series, and the authors didn't want to be writing minors or like children in the positions and like the situations that are going to be coming up. But they very much all act like they're, you know, 16-year-olds at school. So it's just kind of how it is. There's a few grammatical errors I've noticed, which is weird because this isn't like the original indie published edition. This is like the republished edition that came out after. So I'm surprised there's still a few grammatical errors. And they also, disappointingly, the map has just been blown up really badly, which is like, can't really say, pixelated it weird, which is a shame. But I'm really enjoying like these parts at the beginning of the chapters. So the first page of every chapter is like this, and then this flips depending on which twin we're following. I think that's really cool. And it does mean that as you're reading, I don't know if you can see it here, but you can see like the little dark pages coming up, so you can see when the next chapter is, which again is great. But yeah, it's just, look, I am a Geraldine stan through and through, and every time she's on the page, I just can't cope with how much I love her. Even at this beginning part, it's just so, she's just so funny. Like when they're in their water lesson with the Professor Washer, the pervert, and Geraldine bows so low her face ends up underwater. And just knowing that she is going to become such a firm friend for the twins is just so brilliant. The introduction of the characters is going really well, and I'm really enjoying being back in this world, actually. And I was umming and ahhing about whether I would, and I really am enjoying it. Yeah, and so, as I've mentioned, I have read the first book twice before, and I could never get on with the Orion love plot. So obviously Professor Orion and Darcy get involved. So we have the teacher-pupil forbidden romance type thing there. Very forbidden romance. And I never, in the first two reads, I did not like that at all. I'm not a fan of like that kind of power imbalance, and as a general rule, I don't get along with like teacher-student relationships, even if it was like a university setting and they're all adults. I still find it a little iffy. I must admit though, this time round, I'm kind of finding Orion quite charming. And I don't know what that says about me, because I'm aware and I remember my thoughts the first time I read it have been like, no, I'm not enjoying this, like the power imbalance and that. But I'm kind of finding him a little bit charming. Maybe because I know more about his backstory, where I got further in a previous read. Maybe that's why I'm cutting him a little bit of slack, like just outright down in like booze when he's in a meeting with Darcy and stuff. Yeah, I remember before just being like, this guy is like really gross. And maybe now I'm just like, do you know what, Fezzies, like, I know what's happened to you now. I know your history. So yeah, that's why I really enjoy rereading sometimes, because you get so much more out of books. And I do think sometimes you give books a disservice by not giving them a second read or even more, because especially when you come to them at different points in your life, you'll take more out of it. So yeah, that was just to let you know I'm still enjoying it, and I love Geraldine, and I'm surprised by how charming I'm finding Orion. Oh, and I'm still a big Caleb stan. I know that Tori has her own thing going on, and I know that her and Caleb could not be for long, but I'm still a big Caleb stan. I'm still sad that at some point her romance with him kind of drops off, because I don't know, I just like him. I think he's charming. Okay, I will be back. A bit of a different angle. We are 2/3 of the way through Zodiac Academy, and I don't think I mentioned yet about the coercion thing. So as with a lot of kind of fae and mythical creature things, like, you can be coerced by the creatures. It's part of their magic. Usually vampires can do it, and etc. And in this, all fae can do it. And so the fae children grow up learning how to shield from it and repel it, and learning how to do it. And obviously our twins never learnt that. So when the school realizes, it's Professor Orion who realizes or who makes it clear to the rest of the class, and he says to like the students, like, give them hell until they learn how to shield it. And yeah, the students are horrible, and they do use it to bully them, especially the heirs. They use it to really bully the girls. And there's a point where Caleb and Seth have Tori hanging over like a pit with sharp stalactites. Which ones are the floor ones? I don't remember. She manages to, I don't know if I'll be able to find it now. She manages to get them to pull her back up, and then she tries again, but they block it then. But you can see that they're like visibly rattled that she was powerful enough to be able to. Yeah, so she says, pull me up. To my complete and utter shock, Caleb and Seth heaved me up over the edge safely. And then Seth says, shit, eyeing me like he didn't know whether to attack or retreat. And Caleb says, I told you how strong they were. And I love Caleb. He's my ride or die. And I love that he at no point actually underestimates the twins. Even when he is like feeding from Tori as his source, he says from the very beginning, you know, this is going to happen till you can fight me off. He is not, I don't know, he never seems to underestimate them, whereas the other heirs definitely do underestimate them. They've just gone out to the local town for a night out, and they get drunk and they see a bunch of things. So Darcy overhears Orion talking to a tall, leggy, model-looking woman, and it seems like they are discussing killing someone, and Tori and Darcy obviously assume that he wants to kill them, because that was a discussion that Tori overheard Darius and Orion having. Did I mention that? I can't remember. Tori followed Darius one night and followed him to the teacher apartments, and then she overheard him and Orion talking about how they need to kill someone. And then whilst they're out, they get a message from Falling Star. So Falling Star has been messaging them, warning them about Orion and Darius and the other heirs. They don't know who Falling Star is, and they're also not sure whether to trust Falling Star because they don't know who they are. So they get a message from Falling Star saying, meet me in this like alley or whatever in 10 minutes. And the twins go, and then Falling Star messages and is like, oh, by the way, I can't come. And then they are like stalked and almost attacked by a figure that they can't see. It just has a rattling noise. So they obviously assume it's going to be like Orion or the heirs, either playing a prank on them or outright trying to kill them, which is not great. So they manage to escape the alleyway, use a bit of magic, and manage to escape. And then they fall like basically into the arms of the heirs, who are getting drunk in a bar. Darius says, what if we call a truce on our wishes for one night only? And Caleb's like, we just want a fun night. We can leave our political situation out of it. Obviously, Tori and Darcy have something to say about that. But yeah, they kind of agree, kind of. And they agree to have one drink with the heirs. And it gets a little flirty. And Caleb promises not to feed on Tori that night. And then they end up meeting up at like a club and they dance, and it gets very bordering on inappropriate in a dance situation where other people are. And then Orion rocks up and he wants Darius, and he's like, oh yeah, we need to talk about a assignment. He sends Caleb over with this message, and Darius disappears. So we have Darcy getting a little too touchy with Seth, who we all know as a werewolf is very, very touchy anyway. And then Tori is getting very close with Caleb, which I love. I know that he's not in game, but I'm gonna love it whilst I have it. But then the night gets ruined by the knowledge that Geraldine has been attacked, and yeah, so it'll get. And Orion was there to save her. Yeah, they find Orion. When Geraldine's been loaded into like the ambulance, they find Orion covered in blood, and Darius is nowhere in sight. So that's kind of where the night ends. A bit of a party pooper. But as someone who's obviously read a few more ahead of this,
there are some things that do catch my attention, like the only time when they bump into the Heirs, it's not until Darcy starts describing what was attacking them. Is like they're making this horrible noise, like a growl or a rattle, and then Darius gets really interested. And then that's when he's like, let's have a truce, you can stay. And he tries to get Tori to talk more about it, about what happened, but she doesn't want to. As we find out in the next chapter, because I have read the chapter on, Geraldine was attacked by the nymphs, which I don't think I've mentioned before now, but nymphs are like the villainous type of fae in this world that keeps attacking people, and they were to blame for Tori and Darcy's parents' death. And they have like a long claw, like fingernail, that they put into your heart and suck out all of your magic source, and then you're just like either dead or a shell, I believe. And the worry amongst the fake community is that the nymphs are drawing too much power and what they're up to. So that's kind of where we are. There's like a little flirtation going on between Sophia, who is like Tori's friend in the Ignis house, the firehouse, and Diego, who is Darcy's friend in the air house. I'm going to say friend slightly for everything. And yeah, they seem to have a little flirtation going on, and that's kind of where we are. Still enjoying it. Let's get this done.
And we have finished. So, what did I think on this reread? I enjoyed this. I enjoyed it. I was worried that I wouldn't enjoy it as much. I was worried that I don't know. I've read so many other like romantasy books. I was worried that, knowing that this was perhaps not the best writing, and that it's kind of cheesy, I was worried that it wouldn't work for me, but actually being aware of those things helped with the entertainment, because it meant I was able to just kind of switch off and enjoy it. And I know there's conversations to be had around like switching off and like consumption of different media and what we're getting out of it, media literacy, etc. But this was fantastic for what it was, and I had the right expectations going in, because obviously I have read it multiple times, and knowing where this series goes obviously gives me more of a space to really enjoy the fun of this series before it gets into the truly serious stuff. You know, like in this, our biggest concern is that the heirs are bullies, and yet I know in like 4 books time the biggest concern, like them being bullies, not that they are the same as they are in this, but you know, if in 4 books time, if the heirs were acting like they act in this, it would be like the lowest of the twins' care, you know. So yeah, it's a really, I don't know, it's just really fun, and it really captures that moment in indie publishing, particularly, that was being read because of TikTok at the time. And I think that, I don't know, I can see this being almost, I'm not saying I think this is going to be like one of those classics we look back on, but I can see this almost being like, I don't know, like Vampire Academy, that you, in, you know, when in 10, 20 years time or whatever, you pick it up and you read it and you're like, oh, and like Pretty Little Liars is another good example. You read it and you're like, oh, this is just so of its time, but I still enjoy it, and the nostalgia is still there. And I think possibly this series has the potential to be one of those series for people. So the twins find out who it is that's been messaging them under the falling star moniker, and it was their tarot teacher,
they met him. I can't remember if that had happened last time I spoke with you, but he couldn't tell them much. Oh no, it hadn't happened. Right, so after that night out they all had, kind of like around campus turned to, obviously there was a discussion of that. Geraldine had been caught up in it and had some of her like magical essence sapped away by the nymphs. There was like obviously like the outrage of that around campus, and then it turned to kind of like excitement for a school dance that was coming up. And then at the dance, so there was a bit of a fallout after the dance for Darius's and Seth's girlfriends, or the girls, the women they often sleep with and so consider themselves to be their girlfriends. They were obviously pissed off with the Vega twins for dancing a bit amorously with the guys they considered to be their boyfriends. So it's a little bit like mean girl behaviour. Blah blah blah. And then Seth asked Darcy to go to a dance with him, and she like via a note, and she was just like whatever. And they were going with, well, they were basically just going to go with each other, the twins, because they kind of got Diego and Sophia to go together, because Sophia has a little crush on Diego, and the twins were wingmanning. Anyway, so they went, and when they were at the dance, like Seth was getting all on Darcy's side, pretending he's nice and he just wants to be her friend, and knowing that they do end up forming a really good friendship. It's quite interesting when you see like what he's about to do. So he gets her to dance with him, and then they kind of start getting along, and then she goes outside for a bit and she bumps into Orion when she's outside, and he basically warns her, or is this after they Professor Astrum, that's it. He messages them and says, come and meet me at the library. So they go there to meet him, and he tells them a little bit about their family. Right. So he says, those times were dark. Your birth father, King Vega, the savage king, he was the cruelest of rulers. Barely a day went by without a public execution in the capital. Marissa, who is their mum, was trying to protect you from him, from the way the world was too. Nymph attacks rose every year, and King Vega grew panicked, lashing out at his own people in response. He was deeply afraid of them, and in the end that fear was valid. They murdered him, as you know, and arrested his family, and obviously by that point their mum had swapped them out with some human twins. So that explains as well why, I mean, he's known as the Savage King. No one wants the Vega twins to step into, well, obviously there is the Arse Society, the Almighty Sovereign Society, that do want them, but majority of people, like the heirs, don't want them to step into their role because the heirs don't want to lose their power. But a lot of people don't want the Vega twins to step into the role because of how savage their father was as a king, and they don't want those times to come back. So they speak to Astrum, and then they realise that someone enters the library, so like, right, we will get together another time. And then whilst Darcy's outside, Orion comes across her, and he questions her on why she's flirting with Seth, and she's like, what does it bother you? And he's just like, da da da. Says like, just stay away from him, go inside. And she's getting all like fluttery because she has a humongous crush on him, obviously. And then so he's like, yeah, just go inside. And he's kind of like, he's obviously aware of what's, I don't know if he knows in detail, but he's obviously aware something horrible is going to happen to her. He wants to help her without letting her know that he's trying to help her, and she ignores him, obviously. And then Seth arrives, and he's getting all flirty-worty, and he takes her to a bench, and they start kissing, and she swears she can hear like giggling, and then he cuts her hair off, like a big chunk of hair, like scalping her a little bit, because he was trying to get her hair right at the beginning and she wouldn't give it to him. Turns out that Kylie, who was his girlfriend slash not his girlfriend, and her friends were recording it and did it as a prank, and this is because they told Max their deepest fears when they went to a siren club to see if they were sirens. Max got their deepest fears out of them, so Darcy's deepest fear is that she will be alone. She had a boyfriend and she really trusted him, and she slept with him, like gave her virginity to him, and then he dumped her straight after and was like, I was just after you for sex. So that's why she dyes her hair blue, to remind her of the bruise she got when she ran home crying. It's what I mean about Tori being like the main character. Darcy gets given like kind of subpar characterizations, because Tori's greatest fear is she was in the car with her boyfriend who was driving too fast, or a guy she was seeing, and he crashed into a river, and he got out and saved himself, and she was stuck like in her seatbelt and almost drowned. So she's definitely afraid of like deep water, understandably. So like I know you can't compare them, but when you compare the two, Tori's is actually quite like horrific, and Darcy's is just like, I dye my hair blue because a guy dumped me. You know, it just kind of seems silly in comparison. So so they go after Darcy's hair, cut a big chunk off, and then when she's sitting there crying, they run off to go. All of like the Seth and all of them lot run off because something's happening to Tori elsewhere. And then when Darcy's sitting there crying, Orion comes back and she's like, "Why'd you come back?" And he says, my spidey senses were tingling," and he chuckles. And she's like, "Is that a joke?" He was like, "It was a pretty good one, I think." And then he says, "Now the blue's gone, how will I tell which twin is which?" He just kind of like makes her laugh and makes her feel a bit better. And then at the same time, Tori has been grabbed by Darius and he takes her to the swimming pool. Caleb had tried to get her to skip the dance and hang out with him, which I think is, I haven't read this from the boys' POV, but I think that's like, and that was either that he wanted her in an easy place, like the heirs wanted her in an easy place to grab and take her to this bullying that they're about to do, or maybe it was his way of kind of saving her. I don't know. Maybe, I'm assuming it will tell me more in the boys' POV of this, which I'll read in a couple of months. They take her to a swimming pool and they compel her to jump in to scare her, but then they take it even further. So Darius is like, "You have to go up," and she says, "I can barely swim, I'll drown if I jump in there." And he's like, "Are you ready to bow to us then and leave this school behind?" And she looks at him, she doesn't glare or scowl. Let him see who is doing this to. She just wants to like be who she is without the front. Let him see who is doing this to, while wondering if he was even capable of pity or remorse. I wasn't some long lost heir come to steal his throne. I was just a girl trying to reclaim something that had been stolen from her and figure out my place in this screwed up world. Darius's lips parted and something shifted in his eyes. For half a second I actually thought he was going to back off. Let me walk away with my tail between my legs and be satisfied by knowing he'd won without forcing me to go through with this. And then Max compels start climbing all the way to the top. So she goes up. She's just like in her dress from the ball, the dance. She goes up the diving board all the way to the top and being like coerced up there. And then she doesn't want them to coerce her into jumping in. She actually manages to so Max tries to coerce her into jumping in and she actually manages to fight it. And then she sees Seth lift his arms and she feel like him building up the wind behind her to push her in. She's like, "No, I'm going to do it on my own purposes." So she runs and jumps in, quite panicky, and then she hits the water. She can't swim. She's deathly afraid of drowning. And then they start using their powers to make it really awful. Like they use their water powers to make waves in it so she can't get up for breath. And then they end up freezing the top of the water so she can't get out at all. And she's trying to use her fire to punch through. And she's basically drowning because every time she punches through with her fire magic, and she's like losing, her power as she goes along, losing the momentum and the adrenaline to keep going. They freeze it back over so she just can't catch her breath and she can feel like her lungs burning and stuff. And then everything goes black. And then we switch to Darcy's POV, who runs there with Orion because she's like, something's happening to Tori. And Orion goes mad and he like doesn't let anyone leave, and he's like, anyone that leaves this room is going to be immediately expelled. He jumps in, gets her out of the water. He gets all the water out of her, like brings her back to life basically. And bless her, she's just laying there completely like drowned in front of everyone, completely like humiliated, and she had to kick off her dress because it was weighing her down. So she's just in like her lacy underwear, and I feel so awful for her. I feel awful for Darcy as well, who's sitting there like scalped. But for Tori, this is just such a, for someone that has a like a tough girl facade all the time, I can't imagine that like vulnerability that she would have been feeling in that situation. Orion's like obviously furious, and he proper has a go at the heirs. He says to Darius, because at this point we kind of know that they have something going on. We assume, because the twins assume that they are working together to try and kill the twins. At this point in the series, we don't know to the extent that their like relationship and friendship goes. Basically, Ryan says to him, I thought you of all the heirs were better than your parents, and then Darius's face contorted as Orion turned his back on him, which I'd gathered was one of the biggest insults he could offer as a fae. Yeah, but then their punishment is they get 2 weeks of detention, the heirs, for trying to kill someone on school grounds. Yeah, sure. And he says like, one more stunt like this and you will be expelled, I don't care who you are. And Tori says, detention, is that it? And Darcy's like, how can you let them get away with this? And Orion's just like, whatever. And then he says to Tori, you need more healing. And she's like, not here, because she doesn't want everyone to see. And he just does that anyway. And then Darcy's watching, and she says, I never felt so low, like the wind had ripped holes in the sails of my life and left them in tatters. But I would fix them and I'd rise again, just not to stay. See, there's these moments when they have like really good bits of writing that pack a punch, and then there's other moments where the writing just feels really clunky and like repetitive, and could have definitely excelled with perhaps a editor or a more competent editor at the helm. But yeah, and then we go to Tori, and she's like, they wanted to break me, and maybe they had. Like, she's utterly just broken. And then some screaming starts outside of the pool, so they go out to see what's going on, and there's fire blazing on the school grounds, and Diego says, I've only ever seen fire dragon burn like that. Orion puts it out with some water, and a body was curled on the ground before us, their flesh burned to a blackened crisp, and their limbs coiled up in a fetal position. And they realised it was Professor Astrium that had been killed and set on fire on school grounds, whilst everyone was at the dance. Well, technically, most of them were in that swim pool. Before he could tell Tori and Darcy what he knew and what he wanted to tell them, Darcy is looking at him, and she notices something in his hand, and she quickly grabs it before Orion or anyone can see it. And it's the death card, and then written on it is, I made a mistake and now my time is up. The shadow has discovered me, and there is no hope for me to escape their wrath. The answers you seek are hidden between Leo and Libra. Don't trust the flames. Claim your throne, falling star. And then it finishes with just, we were alone against the heirs, and I was beginning to think we were destined to fall at their mercy. And that's the end of this book, and that is a really good ending. That is so like cliffhanger, like compelling. Just, yes, I want to read more. And honestly, as soon as I finished this, I was like, I want to read the second one right now. So it did it caught me in. So yeah, I just think this was just, I'm so pleased I decided to do this and go on this journey and reread this and properly, like, I don't know, and just like annotate my thoughts and share my thoughts with you. It's just really added to the fun of it. If you've read this series, or at least this book, let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you are a big Zodiac Academy fan and you've had any thoughts along with me, let me know in the comments. I need to hear like who your favourite was at this point, or whatever, or yeah, just your favourite book in the series. Just let me know, with no spoilers, for anyone that might be reading along at the same pace as me. Oh my god, that was so fun. So I will see you next month for another reading vlog for book 2. and we would just keep this going as long as I can, really. Each month we'll try and do one, and then it get pretty chunky a bit later on, so it might end up being a little bit more than a month, but we shall try. Thank you so much for being with me today. Make sure to like this video so it gets pushed out to more people that might like to hear my thoughts on Zodiac Academy. Make sure to subscribe so that you see when I upload another Zodiac Academy reading vlog, and I will see you soon. Thank you for joining me today, friends. Bye.